morning, Twin Cities. Welcome to Reckoning with Real Estate, a show about the American dream and building a better real estate company. I'm Paige Kale with the Real Estate Collaborative, and I'm joined today by Ben Feldman with Active Insurance Solutions. He's also one of the show's sponsors. So welcome, Ben.
Thanks for having me on. Good morning.
Yeah, good
Happy
morning.
New Year.
Yeah, you too. And we're going to talk about insurance claims this morning and kind of the do's and the don'ts and the ins and the outs. And I think, so Ben, we've done one show together. So why don't you, for those listeners who didn't hear that one show, why don't you reintroduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your company.
Yeah, so I own an independent insurance agency. We're anchored out of Chanhassen, but right all across the state, helping new home buyers and those upgrading their home, second or third purchase as well. So do home and auto insurance. And yeah, I've been doing this for almost a decade now, and we have a team of 6 in Chanhassen. And yeah, excited to be involved here and answer some questions and hopefully provide some insights to those either prospective home buyers or current homeowners with respect to claims and home claims and some tips and tricks when it comes to all that.
Great. And why don't you, while I'm thinking of it, why don't you let people know how they can find you online?
Yeah, so aisolutionsmn.com is our website, Active Insurance Solutions. You can find us on Google too. Search there, but yeah, you can reach out through our website for a quote, or you can find my contact information on the website as well. Not super active on social media. I'm on LinkedIn, but we're working on getting more active on Instagram and all the things. But website's a great place to go to get in touch with us.
Yep, great. And we were talking a little bit before we got on air that I, having been in the real estate industry for 2+ decades, I know a little bit about homeowners insurance, but I will say it's probably the part of the transaction that I know the least about. So this will be good. I'll ask you some questions and let's get going. So why don't you talk about when folks want to make an insurance claim, kind of what's the first step?
Yeah. I think like baseline, what's important for everyone to understand is that if you aren't already aware, like when you make a home insurance claim on your property, whether it's kind of like when you're driving a car, if you have an accident or a claim, those go on your insurance history report, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you go and shop around, those violations or those claims you've made follow you and can impact your rates, usually for 5 years. On home insurance, it's a very similar thing where a claim on any property that you own, even if it's a prior home that you owned 3 years ago, if you had a claim on, when you go to shop for or move and buy a new property, you have a claims history report on your homeowners that also is used by carriers to determine the rates that they're going to offer you. And one huge factor in rating of that policy is there's a lot of factors that go in: age of the home, age of the roof, all these things. But your claims history is a big factor, where if you've had water claims or a fire claim or multiple theft claims or something like that, those all impact the rate that you're offered, or even if you're going to be offered a rate by a carrier. We write with 20+ companies, so all of them have different criteria of how they surcharge and how many claims you can have on your report to be eligible for home insurance with them. But it is a big thing. And so kind of that's table stakes for understanding that when you're going to make a home claim, before you just call 1-800 or go on the website and submit a claim, it's important that you're partnering with your agent to have a conversation to say, hey, like, this is what's going on. Do I have coverage for this? 1, and 2, if I do have coverage, what's my deductible and how is this going to impact my future situation? And so partnership with your agent really solves all these problems. Everything else I'm going to share, your agent hopefully is going to be talking with you when you have that call. And instead of just going online and starting the claim when you have water coming through your ceiling or a leak, call your agent, because they should be able to talk you through some of these tips and tricks or the right steps of like, hey, should you file or should you not file?
How often do your customers, your clients, call you or one of your team members directly before they file a claim? Like, is it common that they do that? Because you've kind of
we do our best to educate our clients on, like, when we bring them on board, we always say, hey, in the future, contact us for changes or questions, or if you think you may need to file a claim, call us. We can consult you on it. That's a part of our job as your agent. But, the average client, we speak with them maybe once or twice a year at most. We work with 1,800 households and we have a team of 6. And so if someone wants to shop around or look at new options or they're filing a claim, it's usually a touch point or 2 a year on average. And so making sure we educate them on this is we do this as best as we can, but sometimes people forget or their spouse wasn't involved in the conversation and they get the document and they find the number on the policy and they just file the claim. Right.
And I'm sure if people have like water coming through their roof or whatever, they're panicking.
Right. They're like, first thing they do is I got to file the claim. And really it's not. And that's, one of maybe the first thing we can talk about with a claim is like when you have a loss incident, the first thing you want to do before you even call your carrier or open up claim, it's like you want to do whatever you can to mitigate damage, right? So if you have calling a contractor or a remediation company, if you need a recommendation, we would make a recommendation to say, hey, get out there and you should, try to stop what's ever happening. If it's a backup situation or trying to get the water out, like working to mitigate damage.
So along those lines, just a quick question about that. If folks do that, call somebody and have them come in and, let's use the sewer backup, right? Backup issue that obviously people are going to want taken care of right away.
Right.
Do insurance companies then always kind of come in the back on the backside and say, yep, we'll cover that? Or is there some danger, I guess, to doing that?
Right. So some of the risks is like, do you have coverage for water, sewer, and backup? Like your example you talked about, if you have a backup situation in your basement, some policies don't have like the agent might not have put it on the policy or recommended it. So do you have water, sewer, and backup on your policy? That's a good one for people to check because next to hail, water, sewer, and backup in Minnesota is probably the second most common claim type. And it's not a default coverage on your home policy. It's something your agent, at our agency, we try to include 10 or 25,000, depending on the size of the home at minimum on everyone's home insurance policy, regardless of whether the basement's finished or the size of the home, because it is a pretty common loss type. So if you have an instance like that, calling your agent, they could say, hey, yes, you have coverage for this. Before we decide if it makes sense to file a claim, like we usually say, hey, get in touch with a contractor, talk about rough costs, get them on scene, document everything obviously is important when you're doing that. But if you have like, a minimal amount of backup in your basement and it wasn't sewage and there's no carpet and you just had to get the water out and there's no damage, like don't call your insurance provider to file a claim because you have a $5,000 deductible. Like you're going to create, what happens there is if you call and open the claim, it goes on your history report, $0 claim. And a lot of carriers treat that just a $0 payout, just like they would treat a $10 or $15, $20,000 payout.
Really? Oh, really? They look at the claims kind of equally, regardless
payout
of
amount sometimes doesn't even make a difference. And so you could have a $0 loss. It still make you ineligible with a provider, or it might surcharge you depending on how they're configured.
Sure.
And so it's always best to keep that until you know that you should file, and we can help you do that. We try to say, hey, like get in touch with the contractor. Let's get some estimate of costs, mitigate the damage obviously is important, but don't just like pick up the phone and call 1-800 to file the claim. Do some pre-work. What coverage do I have? What's my deductible? Get a contractor on the scene to give you a sense of what's going on. And then collectively, let's decide, hey, maybe you have a $5,000 deductible and you have the coverage on your policy, but you have $5,000 deductible and the damage is only $7,000. So you're going to get $2,000 from the claim.
Right.
Well, for some people, they might pay that back in increased premiums in 1 year, just the next year on renewal, because they have a water damage claim on their policy. And so if you had that situation, we would say, hey, you have a $5,000 deductible. You'll get $2,000 from filing this claim, but you're probably going to pay $4,000 to $5,000 of increased premiums over the next 5 years as a result of filing this. We would say, hey, I know this is unfortunate, but paying $7,000 out of pocket right now is the best financial decision.
Sure.
You pay $5,000 anyways, and the extra $2,000, it's better off you don't file a claim here. So we try to educate them on that because a lot of people don't understand the rift or the impact of a surcharge and eligibility that comes with filing. And so it's really the responsibility of your agent to help you understand that situation and kind of work through that with you as a consultant.
Right. And what is the best way? Like I'm sitting here thinking about homeowners insurance and all the different pieces that are involved in it. and between the deductible and the different add-on coverages. And, when people buy a home, they have to have homeowners insurance. Generally, if you have a lender, you have to have homeowners insurance. But I'm guessing most people just kind of forget about their coverage until they need it.
Right.
And then don't really know kind of what their coverage is. So what would you recommend for folks to kind of always kind of know what their coverage is? Is it like an annual review of their coverage? Is it, I keep thinking of, it's my age, like having a little note card with like, just here's my deductible. Here are the things that are covered. Here are the things that aren't covered. Here's my insurance agent's name and phone number.
Right.
But
I think the biggest thing for a new home owner who's never had an insurance claim and never gone through, do I have this coverage? What coverage do I need? It's like, whoever you're working with, that agent, hopefully it's not a 1-800. And I always say, whether it's an independent agency or someone local, who's going to, you want to find someone that you trust who's going to recommend the right thing, because we could spend hours working through policy form and optional coverages. And you'd be like, I have no idea. Do I need this? And I'm like, well, like, here's my recommendation, right? But you don't know, you haven't been through a claim. And so you're kind of trusting the agent or advisor involved, whether that's someone like myself in Chanhassen, that you've met face to face, or if you're calling 1-800 Geico and trying to get insurance, you've never met that person, you'll probably never speak to him again, whoever's talking to you, because you don't have usually get an assigned agent when you're working with online or 1-800. And so you really have to put faith and trust in, I would say, the agent you're working with to recommend something, because the average person just doesn't have the time or capacity or probably desire to go deep enough to feel like they're an expert on what exact coverage limits they need. And so that's our job as the agent, is kind of be like, hey, this is the size home. This is your situation. Here's your net worth or assets, value of the house. Like, this is what we would recommend. And if people want to pull back or add, that's kind of what we work through with them. But it's easy for me to say as an agent, like, oh yeah, you can explain all this stuff, but just to the average person, you really just have to put faith in a relationship and trust that they're going to recommend a policy that is going to be fitting for your situation. And that's really kind of what it comes down to. And
I think that's really good advice. And we've talked about that on this show before, when it comes to lenders, when it comes to even realtors that you're working with, because there are a lot of like kind of national big brands out there that folks can work with, like the Redfins and stuff. But it's really that eyeball to eyeball. Like I always say, you want to know where the person is, and that you're going to be able to have a relationship with them, and build that trust and stuff. So
someone who's worked with them or gone through, that's where referrals and recommendations from people you trust and care about is really important. Yeah, totally agree. Okay, well, we are going to go to break, and you are listening to Reckoning with Real Estate. We're with Ben Feldman with Active Insurance Solutions, and we will be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to Reckoning with Real Estate. I'm Paige Kao with the Real Estate Collaborative, and you can find us at therecolab.com. That's RTHERECOLLAB as in boy.com. And I'm here with Ben Feldman with Active Insurance Solutions. And at the first half of the show, we talked about why it's so important when you need to make a claim on your home because of some water damage or some fire issue or something. The importance of contacting your agent before you make that claim, because it can impact your future premiums the following year. And we thought we'd start off this segment by talking about the most common claims that Ben sees in Minnesota. Yeah. So by far and away, and as many of you probably would guess, even if you're not a super knowledgeable homeowner currently, you probably see signs with roofing companies or hear on the news all the hailstorms that we've had here the last 2, 3, 4 years in Minnesota. Hail is by far and away the number one most common claim type on for a homeowner in Minnesota.
And then that leads to roof claims and siding claims and all that.
So for another episode, we can talk more about roofing or windstorm hail claims and roofing claims and all that and everything that goes with it. But it's definitely one of the most common claim types, and it's the most challenging thing from a profitability perspective, and why everyone's premiums are high is typically because of windstorm and hail in Minnesota. A lot of roofs being replaced as a result of that. After you kind of set that one to the side, next in line is typically is going to be water damage. Water, sewer, and backup is a pretty common one in Minnesota. Sewage backing up from typically the drains in the home, and so that coverage, as we talked about earlier in the episode, is a optional elective coverage to include on your policy, water, sewer, and backup. So it's a good one to discuss with your agent when you're buying a home or when you're shopping around, to ask if that coverage is included, because it's probably the second most common claim type. After that, we see, theft and fire are probably, service line are probably next in line with claim frequency.
What do you mean when you say service line?
Yeah, service line coverage is going to cover the utility lines, water, like the sewer line from the street to the house, or also like the electrical lines connecting to the home. For power, the sewer line is the most common type where that might collapse or be clogged or be damaged and need to be excavated. So
just so I'm clear, so that is distinct from what you mentioned a few minutes ago about the water sewer backup.
Yep.
Gotcha.
So the backup is actually the damage that occurs inside the home, like to carpet or drywall or property. Okay. The service line coverage actually covers that line that may have clogged that caused the backup.
And that's an optional coverage.
Both of them are optional on your policy.
Both of them are optional.
Yep. And so service line, water sewer backup is offered by basically every company that exists who's writing home insurance in Minnesota. But the service line is one that's very commonly offered on the policy with most companies in Minnesota. If you can't get it on your home insurance policy, you can get it now through a third party or like Xcel Energy. HomeServe is the company who offers that coverage standalone. Yeah. So if you can't get it with your home insurance provider, you can pay $10-$20 a month to add it and have it secured separately. And
well, and one thing, and you and I have talked about this, one thing that as a realtor and showing folks homes and going through inspections, one thing we're seeing a lot more of, and one thing we recommend when people are buying, certainly in St. Paul and Minneapolis, but also in some of the first tier suburbs, is to have that sewer line inspected.
Yep.
And everybody literally holds their breath until we get that funny little video back to see see if the sewer line is still intact or if it needs a repair or, God forbid, a replacement, because it is no joke. It can be like $20,000 easily if it needs to be replaced. So for our listeners, if you own a home now, I would just call your agent and make sure, especially if you're in the central cities, make sure that you have that coverage. Is it something that people can add on after the fact?
Yeah. So if you don't have it currently, most providers, either if you've had a policy with the same carrier for a long time, they may have added the coverage in the last few years, but it's not on your policy because it was an elective add-on and maybe your agent never brought it up with you. So it's very possible, if you don't have it now, that your carrier does offer it or added it to the suite of offerings over the last 3 or 4 years. So for those people who maybe have been with the carrier for 10 years and you're they're on that same policy from 10 years ago, it's very likely your carrier now offers it, but it may not be included. And so that's something to ask your agent.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that, people, being with the same company, the same agent for 10, 20 years. I think it's pretty common that people get insurance and they just forget about it and they just let it renew year over year. I know I do that. And I'm just going to give you a quick shout out. A couple years ago, you talked to some clients who had been in their home for 30 years. It was in Minneapolis, in South Minneapolis. I think you know who I'm talking about. And they gave you a call because they were looking to buy a new house. And in the conversation, I think you did a little look-see into their current house and the policy. And you were able to save them a ton of money. Like, she still kind of talks about you and like how happy she was to have that conversation. And even though they were only going to be in their house another year or two, you were able to save them hundreds. I don't know how much money, but it was significant. So it's worth, point being, it's worth, if you've been with the same insurance company for a long time, you may want to give Ben a call.
Happy to take a look.
Yeah. You also mentioned during break, and I find this kind of fascinating. I love databases, that's part of it. But there's a database that insurance companies look at when they're looking to insure a property. Can you tell us
Yeah,
about that?
so it's called a clue report. Basically, it's like the central claims reporting database for all home insurance providers, where just like your vehicle history report with the state, court records, they all get reported to a motor vehicle records. And so that's maintained. And so with home insurance, if you file a claim, say you're insured with AAA and you file a claim there, and then you move to Travelers 2 years later and there's a claim there, all those continue to feed into a master reporting hub that when you shop for insurance, all these providers, whether you're getting quotes from State Farm or Farmers or auto owners, whoever it is, they're all referencing this report. And so your claims on a property you sold 3 years ago, that if you made a claim 3 years ago and you sold that property, it still follows you in your name to your new purchase and will be a question. And then also in that hub, so if I'm quoting you're buying a new home next month, we're quoting it, say you had a claim 3 years ago on a different property, we would see that and that would be taken into consideration for your rate. Unfortunately, it could surcharge you if depending on the type of claim. But then also if you're buying a new house, the agent typically and the carriers will discover claims on the new property you're buying from the prior owners. And sometimes they won't penalize you for it, but they will ask questions and say, hey, we see there's a water claim from last year here. Was it repaired? Or they want to know that it's been handled and repaired. And so even though it wasn't yours, they might have you, we would tell the client to say, hey, go talk or have Paige talk with the seller to say, hey, maybe this wasn't on the disclosures, or maybe it was on this, like we had a water claim, they should be disclosing that damage on the disclosures. But if they didn't, and the report is saying there was a water loss there last year, it's good to go back and say, hey, was this handled? Was it repaired? Especially if you're not seeing it show up on the disclosures. So typically the carrier just wants to know it's been resolved, but it does sometimes come up. And yes, it's not easy for us to, like, if you're looking at a new house you want to buy, like for us to pull claims, like it's not like click of a button, but when you're working through a new business application, typically that's pulled and that becomes a question.
Yeah. And I always wonder, going through the, helping people buy homes, sometimes as their realtor, as their representative, I get questions that are coming from their insurance agent, has the electrical been updated? When? What is the age of the roof? Some of these things are on the disclosures, or they should be. But the electrical in particular, I'm just going to ask you this question. Sometimes I get the question and sometimes I don't. I would say maybe 20% of the time there's some follow-up questions by the insurance agent, and often there's not. And what's the difference there?
Yeah. So when it comes to disclosure of electrical, like aluminum wiring or knob and tube or fuse boxes, a good agent is going to ask the question. And the problem is the client sometimes might not know. If it's on the disclosures or their inspection report, it doesn't come up. Say we ask them, do they have circuit breakers? The things that have the flips back and forth. Yes. Okay. That's helpful because they usually know the panel. Fuses are like circular inserts, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes to aluminum wiring and like knob and tube wiring,
kind of what's behind the walls.
Yeah. Sometimes if there's no inspection, they don't know, or even if there was, they don't recall it in the conversation. So the agent isn't always requesting the inspection reports or asking the question as they should.
Yeah.
But even if we ask the question, a lot of times the clients may not know unless it's came up as an issue in the process with their realtor, et cetera. And so most carriers are in the state of Minnesota, knob and tube or aluminum wiring is a big red flag, and it's very challenging to get coverage replacement with a carrier in Minnesota. You may end up with the fair plan, and the agents who may write it, or if people are like, oh, they have knob and tube wiring, they're with the X carrier, it's probably because the agent maybe didn't do their job, or the application, they signed an application that said they didn't have it, even though the property does. And if there's a loss, it's kind of like, well, what's going to happen? Who's responsible? Did you sign the app? Who disclosed it? Who knew about it? Did anyone know about it? It's a lot of gray. And so it's tricky because it's not easy to understand some of the wiring or update stuff all the time unless it's been brought to the attention of the homeowner or in the new purchase process. So, but it is a massive fire hazard. And that's the reason that a lot of carriers just won't touch it, is because knob and tube wiring or, old fuse boxes, knob and tube wiring, all that stuff is higher fire hazard. And obviously those are the largest insurance claims when they occur.
Yeah. And when we're walking through homes with buyers and when we're working with sellers to list their home, I always look at the electrical panel and I want to know the age of the mechanicals, the age of the roof, as much information as they can provide,
Right.
so that the buyers know. And we talked about this a little bit during break too, is the importance of when you're looking at a home, whether it was built 10, 20, 30 years ago, or sometimes 100 or more years ago, really knowing kind of all these different components between the mechanicals and the structural, kind of what are their ages,
Right.
just so you don't go in blind to home ownership and you understand, like, if your roof is, if you buy a home with a 20-year-old roof, you know, the roof may still be working. That's great, but it may have implications
Right.
on your homeowner's insurance, how much you're paying, or, you know, if
Right.
you have a loss.
And I recommend for new home buyers, like permit records are now online and available with most cities. So it's something they can do some digging on their own as well to.
Oh, yeah, you're talking about the
Years.
permits.
Right.
Yeah, that's, I love going to the permits. Some cities some cities, their permit, anyway, well, that's a different episode. Okay, well, thanks for being here, and you're listening to Reckoning with Real Estate, and we hope to see you next Sunday.
You still show